Congratulations on this amazing event. I've managed to watch some of the sessions this morning and it's been really stimulating and enjoyable. What a great way to start 2021 with a positive outlook. So thank you very much indeed. And it's great to be part of it. So yes, I'm going to give you a short presentation. I'll just open it. Let's have a look. Okay. And it's really to get you thinking about yourselves. We do spend a lot of time thinking about our students, but let's think about ourselves as well. So this session will look at teaching qualifications, but specifically focus on CELT-P and CELT-S. So I have to start by saying, if I hadn't had a Cambridge Assessment English qualification, I wouldn't be here today. So I feel very strongly about the opportunity for teacher development and that we can keep growing. And as Alexandra was saying before, having a growth mindset for ourselves is so important. So I just wanted you to reflect a little bit. Actually, Alexandra has already got you doing it, and so it kind of fits in very well. I thought it was lovely what you were saying about the lessons that you learned along the way, Alessandra, especially the question about when you were asked, what do you do? And you said, you gave a long explanation, and the person you met said, I teach students. What a powerful lesson. So I just want you to think about some of those steps in your life that have brought you to where you are. I'm not going to ask you to write it in the chat because I think it may be quite personal, but there may be many stepping stones, which might be qualifications. They might be people you met, like Alessandra said, and some of them which will have stayed with you. You spoke about your students' teachers and your impact on teachers. So you might have a teacher who influenced you. I would also confess there was a time in my life when I said, I don't want to be a teacher, because my mother was. I don't know if any of you have had that experience, any of you with parents who are teachers, but I'm very glad that I obviously decided to take that back and to join the teaching teams around the world. So yes, there are some very important points in your career, and those stepping stones really need to continue. And I think it's very appropriate with such an amazing school. I mean, Twinkle Star, we just heard a little bit about the history, and obviously focusing on excellence and motivating their own staff is really to be commended. Congratulations to what you have achieved. And I just want to think about that figure of the teacher and how, when you can light up someone's mind, how important that is. And of course, this is a quote from the poet laureate, Andrew Motion, about one of his teachers. And I think it's the idea of that light bulb in your head. And we've all had teachers who've done that, and we've had teachers who've turned off that light bulb. And we don't want to be one of those, as Alessandra was saying. So the quality of teaching, obviously, actually has the biggest single impact on students' learning, apart from the empathy and that relationship that you have with your students. But the next thing is that quality of teaching and using your teaching skills to appropriately adapt what you do with your students. And of course, like we said about Twinkle Star, the universal characteristic of high-performing schools is good teachers and good teaching. So I'm obviously, from what we've just heard, the team is particularly strong, but I'm sure many people in the audience are also working in excellent places, or perhaps just being an excellent teacher as a freelance. So that's really where we're trying to go. So good teachers never stop learning. I just love the picture, and we've had a lot of those topics actually spoken about this morning. And I think every now and again we have to stop and think about ourselves. we give and we give and we give, we need some input too. So a day like today, of course, is one opportunity to do that. So where to start thinking about extending your professional development, or perhaps improving it or giving yourself some goals? Having a plan, as Alexandra said. Again, I think we didn't talk before, so it's perfect. And where am I now? And where do I want to go? That sounds easy, but how am I going to get there, of course, is the big question. And there are many routes, and there is no right one and there's no wrong one. And what I'm talking about is the formal ways of moving ahead, formal ways of getting to improve your own CV and your own confidence as a teacher. Now, I don't know how many of you are aware of the Cambridge English Teaching Framework. This is quite a powerful document, and it has different areas, and this shows you the stages according to a teacher's development, from foundation, when they're perhaps a new teacher, developing through their teaching career and moving on to being expert. I don't think there's probably expert plus, but we haven't got that on the framework. It's got the different stages, but it's also got the different categories which help you see what that means in terms of progression. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you to read all that now. It's a lot of information. But one of the things you can do is, of course, look at that framework and do some self-reflection and think about where am I in this at the moment? Where would I like to be? And also, I think when you're teaching, it's quite easy to get into habits that perhaps restrict your vision. So by forcing yourself, if you like, to look at different areas of teaching, you might think, oh, yes, maybe I haven't paid enough attention to that aspect. Or maybe that's an area I hadn't thought about developing. And I think these tools here help teachers who are perhaps, particularly if they're working alone and don't have feedback. Something like this can be extremely helpful. If you click down even further, each of the categories that we had on that other slide, you actually get the competency statements. It's a bit like the can-do statements for teaching. And this is just one category, and you can see for each of the 4 stages how that develops. There is also a trainer framework. So any of you who are involved in training and thinking about developing your training, there is also a trainer framework with statements like these, which can help you design and feel a sense of progression, whether that's teaching or in training. I think it's really helpful. And as I said, I think it helps you identify areas that perhaps you've neglected or haven't yet explored. This is just to show you the expert end of language teaching methodology and SLA, what it actually means. And you can see there's quite a lot of requirements to be at that top level there. So we can all keep growing if we want to get to that. So I'm just going to mention a few of the Cambridge Assessment English teaching qualifications. And the first to mention is TKT, which some of you may be aware of. Is actually the Teaching Knowledge Test. This is a test of your knowledge and not practical, in the sense of you don't have to demonstrate that you actually can perform what you know about. This really tests your knowledge as a teacher. And there are different modules, and I'll show you in a moment because it's particularly relevant to CELT-P and CELT-S. So Teaching Knowledge Test has different modules, and you can take them independently, and I'll tell them about them in a moment. CELTA is the qualification I started with many, many moons ago, which is the Certificate in Teaching English to Speakers of Other Language. This involves a course, teaching practice, and continuous assessment, but it's quite an involving course, difficult to do while you're actually working. potentially. Delta is for teachers who are particularly experienced, probably 3 to 5 years after CELT-A, with extremely, with a lot of experience of different levels, different materials, and there is a written exam for this as well as a practical exam. But those are not the ones I'm going to focus on now, but just so you have the kind of overview of teaching qualifications. Now, TKT, as I said, is particularly important because Module 1 looks at, obviously, language teaching methodology and approaches to teaching. And you study those areas and then you do a test on that particular module. Now, there are other modules, Module 2 and Module 3. These three, if you like, are called the core modules of TKT. And the second, as you can see there, is about lesson planning and resources. And the third is about classroom management, teacher language and assessment. And these are independent modules. You don't have to do 1, 2, 3. You could do Module 3, then do number 1. No, so they're not actually, it's not necessary to do them in that order if you wish to do those. Now, there are 2 other modules which again stand alone, so you don't have to do all of them. You could just choose the ones you're interested in. And this is the TKT Young Learners, obviously focusing on teaching methodology for the primary classroom. And then we have CLIL, so TKT, Content Language Integrated Learning, of course, increasingly relevant as teachers are beginning to teach other subjects in English and want to have some kind of qualifications. So that's the kind of TKT set. And again, as I said, they're all independent and you can take them separately. They're all tested objectively. So they're not testing your level of English. You don't have to do a speaking test. You don't have to do any free writing activities. It's all objective testing. So true, false, multiple choice, those kind of questions. And they're all the same format. So you have, as you can see there, 80 questions in any of those modules, and they all take 1 hour, 20 minutes. Have 3 parts. If you want to find out more about the detail, you can actually look at sample papers, etc. too, but we're not going to do that now. But we are going to go from that to thinking about in-service teaching qualifications. And one of the things that you can do are the 2 CELT courses. Again, there are 2 levels. So you have CELT-P and CELT-S. So of course that stands for primary and the other stands for secondary. Again, you don't have to do one and then the other. You can just do one. You can do both, depending on your interest. There is a tiny bit of overlap, but not very much. So if you're thinking of you're interested in both levels, great, fantastic. Why not? Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about those because they're specially designed for engaging school students. So again, if you're teaching rather than adults, it's more for school. So the idea is to help you develop your teaching quality, to become more aware, and of course, help your students have better outcomes as a result. There have been some big projects around the world, including in Panama, where large numbers of teachers were sponsored by their Ministry of Education to actually do them, lucky them. But in other parts of the world, many individual teachers are deciding to take this qualification. And the reason I particularly excited about it is that you can do it while you're working. It's relevant to your working context, and you make it relevant to the students you have in front of you. Now, the model of it is the same for both levels. So you have an online self-study course, so that's great because you can choose when you study. There are some face-to-face training sessions when it's not locked down. You obviously get together, but at the moment, probably remotely. And there are assessed tasks and teaching practice related to it. And you have to take one of the TKT modules, and I'll tell you about that as we go through. Now, if you do all that, then you can actually get the qualification CELT-P or CELT-S. So that's the kind of mechanism of how it works. So let's have a little look at it in more detail. And as I said, the real focus is on classroom practice. So while TKT is important because it focuses on the theory, if you like, the thing I like is that you can, with CELT-P, is that you focus on really what happens in the classroom and in your classroom. So I'm going to look at CELT-P just quickly and then have a look at CELT-S. So again, practical, communicative focus, that classroom of the future that, again, Alexandra was mentioning. Just so you know, the difference between the two is obviously the age group, and they're classifying primary as 6 to 12, so not the very, very young. So I think that's probably useful to know. And again, this is a feature of flexibility because, you know, with the blended study, the online bit, you can manage in your own time. And obviously your Twinkle, who run the course, would talk about the other part of this. So that's the kind of overview of what you get. It's quite a lot of hours. So you really come out with a good overview of skills. And again, it's kind of motivating because you have a pathway, and it's usually done between 6 and 12 months, depending on where you take it. So without going into too much detail, but a little bit, there are 9 modules for CELT-P, and they obviously look at obviously development of the young learner, looking at skills, different kinds, looking at obviously language work, grammar and vocabulary, how you do classroom management, and of course that's particularly challenging at the moment if you're doing it online, and resources, and of course assessment. So you really get a full picture of all the skills that teachers need to be thinking about and resources. So each of the modules of those 9 modules look at the topic, so very focused, but looking at principles and activities. So that's the idea, is that when you're doing it, you actually get involved because you actually have to do activities as you go through the material. And then you can apply it to your own classroom. And that's part of the experimentation is encouraged during the course. And there are little progress tests that you can use. You can repeat the material, you can do it again. So again, you can self-pace. So very good for the autonomous learner. And this bit is 120 hours. There are 2 sections to the teaching practice. One is a portfolio, which is compulsory. And you have different practical portfolio tasks. So each module has a practical written task, and you have to apply your learning. And these tasks are typically something that a task to carry out in your classroom using the methodology from that unit, and then you have to report back and show evidence that you've actually tried it out. So the face-to-face or probably remote sessions are the idea to extend that opportunity to share with the other people on the course, and obviously to engage and share best practice and discuss things with your tutor, as you will have a tutor during the course, and you can ask questions and obviously take it a bit further. Now, the bit, as I said, I think is particularly important, and I'm ever so grateful that I've had practical classroom observation. And I think if you've not had it recently, it's always useful. If you've never had it before, it's incredibly important to be observed and to get feedback from another professional. And the teaching practice itself gives you the opportunity, obviously, to try it. It will, again, makes you focus on some aspect that you might not do otherwise if you weren't doing the course. And the feedback will be developmental because you have a appointed trainer. In case Twinkle have trainers, they will give you feedback that helps you develop. And obviously, it's not always easy to do when you're on your own. So the assessment to actually get the whole qualification is you have to do the portfolio at every end of every module. You do the assessed teaching practice, and there are 2 developmental ones. So these are not assessed. These are the ideas to develop the skills and get you ready, if you like, for the assessed observation, because there is one compulsory assessed session which you have observed by a tutor and given a grade. So the written part of the CELT-P is that you have to take the TKT module on young learners. So you already know where you're going with that. And you get a grade, pass with merit as your grades. Now, I've just shown you the platform it's on Moodle. I have been told to say that it's actually going to be updated during this year. But at the moment, it's still very nice and it's very flexible and it's on Moodle. So the platform is very easy to use, and you can obviously, you see the whole material right from the beginning, and you can obviously plan your learning. So if we look at those modules, you've got teaching practice information, TKT information relevant to your to whichever CELT course you're doing, and feedback and grades that will be kept there. Now the material looks something like this at the moment, but you can see immediately that they're practical and classroom related. So ideas for the classroom, but also if you like, the opportunity to see what other people are doing. So list stories, of course, in primary classrooms, typical. You get a question like this. So this is from a discussion forum where teachers are talking about developing listening skills. And in the brown, you get the question, can you think of any tips to give her? So you look at the next slide, and there are some other people's, what they're doing. And what's interesting is that when you read it, you'll realize that the task is very simple, but it makes you read it. So the teachers are discussing activities you can do after learners have listened to the story. Now, you didn't have time to read it, but actually they were before they read the story. So these are the kind of simple activities. They're not complicated, but they help you focus as you go through the material. So that's CELT-P. Let's have a little enlightening visit to CELT-S, also because I want to leave time for the testimonial that we're going to have at the end. And the CELT-P, of course, CELT-S, of course, is secondary, and it's very similar, and the way it's delivered. And of course, it has a similar number of hours, slightly fewer than primary, which is interesting. I think that's possibly because there's more about development of the young learner in that session. There are only 8 modules, not 9, but you won't be surprised by the topics looking at language development, skill development, understanding the learner and resources, and of course an important one about assessment as well, which is greater assessment literacy is always useful. Looking at the portfolio tasks similar to primary, what the kind of tasks are: reviewing online content, considering your own needs, teaching a lesson using a selected technique or a resource. And then it's compulsory to put your evaluation, submit your evaluation as part of your portfolio task. And this is marked by your local trainer. So one portfolio task out of the 8 or 9 that you have will include researching an area. So again, you get some choice, so it becomes really relevant to you and what you want to do with your teaching. The teaching practice, just a little bit more information about that. There are 2, as I said, formative, not the assessment, the formative ones. So the first one at both levels is about setting up, it's about classroom management, which can be online, it can be CLIL, it can be obviously face-to-face, depending on the circumstances that you have. And that's the first task. And the second task is about differentiation, which again is interesting. Alessandra was talking about that. Again, it's a very important area to be thinking about. The third observation is compulsory. and this is assessed as pass with merit, pass or fail, again by a local tutor who has been trained to be a tutor. So to get the qualification, like primary, you have to do your portfolio tasks, you have to do your teaching practice, and of course you have to take a TKT module, but this time it's module 1. So for primary, you obviously do the primary, and for CELT-S, you're doing TKT module, which is why I spent so much time talking about TKT. So you can see, again, the material is very up to date, looking at course book material, getting you to, it's not trying to persuade you to use particular course books, but it's trying to get you to be more aware of evaluating the material that you're using. And so there are some, very theory to practice is the emphasis throughout this course, which is so important, certainly for me anyway. And you get immediate feedback, and you also get ideas. So, try to get your lesson, start a lesson, bring, so there are also practical extension ideas which may help you also have new ideas for your own lessons. That shows it better. So you can see there's a kind of discussion, but virtually, of course. And it does get you at the end of every unit to think about the topic. And for example, here you have a little writing task. You want to set up some pair work. The learners will be asking and answering. What will you say to them? So again, you can see classroom management, classroom language is being looked at here. There's a TKT glossary, which again, I love, and online it's really fantastic. It's a bit like having a dictionary for teachers with lots of methodology discussed here. I've chosen concept questions because that's a classic one. Unless you're a teacher, you wouldn't know what concept checking is all about and how to do it. But this, of course, is included in the glossary, and you need to know the words that are in the TKT glossary for both tests. So again, it makes sure that you've got the core vocabulary that teachers use in the teaching context. There are also further recommendations. So if you want to extend, or you feel that you want to take it further, then of course they're recommending different things to read. And as I said, this is going to be updated this year, so it will be even more up to date. There is a test at the end of every module, so you can check that you've taken on board what you need to. It also means you're indirectly also preparing for your TKT. And just to say, it's very, the language requirement is a minimum B1. That's not normally a problem in Romania. And I think obviously it's more comfortable if your level of English is higher than that. But that's the recommended minimum. And of course, you have to be practicing. You need to have classes to actually be able to do CELT-P or CELT-S. You can't do it if you're not teaching. There is a course schedule. This is an example. But what I'm going to say to you is, yes, they integrate the portfolio tasks, the lesson observation, and the practice, so that you do it gradually throughout the course. You don't do it all at the end, so it becomes a shock. So it's very much about continuous assessment, help motivate you to keep going, because it's quite a long time, 7 to 9 months. And I would like to recommend that you actually go and have a look at Twinkle's information about the courses, so you can see how what you need to do to apply, and also more information about their courses. And obviously Twinkle Star may be able to answer your questions even at the end of this session. And before we hand over to look at our testimonial, I just wanted to leave you this quotation. I think it's just super.